Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman are still working tonight at the site where two
The
bodies...
disappearance of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman was dramatically refocused
In the last few moments, the jury at the Soham trial has returned to the courtroom.
2 years ago, Cambridgeshire schoolgirls Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells were abducted and murdered by a school caretaker. Their disappearance and subsequent events created national shock and outrage. The 10-year-olds had just completed Year 5 at St Andrew's Church of England Primary School in Soham, and the school became the focus of attention from the world's media. Its head teacher, Jeff Fisher, had been a head in Soham for 22 years and was on the verge of retirement. These are his reflections on those events.
It was early in the summer holiday, and my wife and I were all set to go off on holiday on a Monday morning, and we'd got the car packed ready to go, and I got a phone call early on the Monday morning from my deputy, who lives opposite the school, to say that Holly and Jessica had gone missing and that people had been searching overnight. And so I came round to school thinking that when it was light that they would be found very quickly, but I thought I would go around to school to see what I could do. When I came round to school, I met the families of Holly and Jessica who came around here, and we acted as a base during those early hours of that Monday for the police, and then eventually for the press and television. So by late morning, I was doing my first interview.
So if you just ignore the camera and look at me, it'll go into a package, right?
Okay.
Could you just give your name and position for the tape, please?
All right, Jeff Fisher, head teacher at St Andrew's Primary. I'd never had any preparation for that, never had any training. I think over the next 24 hours I did 12 or 13 television interviews and radio interviews.
In terms of, I mean, I'll do a little story, you know, and then if we have the interview as well, it's a big chunk of the programme and it maximises.
Okay.
And then eventually the media moved their camp to the village college because of the rooms that they'd got. So the media camp just moved sort of 100 yards along the site. And then obviously it was apparent that the girls were not going to be found quickly as we'd all hoped. But by the end of that afternoon and early evening, we'd got 300 or 400 people outside wanting to help with the search.
Detectives looking for the two girls are extending their search beyond their hometown to the fens nearby, in an ever-widening radius. This is now less a missing persons inquiry and more a criminal investigation.
Obviously my fears were for the worst. I did keep the hope for quite a long time, actually. I think I wanted to, and so I did, and that was the front that I was, if you like, putting on whenever I was interviewed, because the last thing I wanted was for people to give up on the situation and think that there was no chance of the girls being found again.
We've now had 3 nights where the girls have not gone home. From the outset, we thought this might have been a prank, then we thought there might have been an accident. It's absolutely critical that we get that piece of information.
It all went quiet until the second week of their disappearance, when on the Tuesday evening it was said that there were shallow graves found in Newmarket.
Beyond the silhouetted figures of forensic officers lay the copse, where a jogger had noticed 2 recently dug areas of earth 30 yards apart. Police erected a tent to protect the soil. No potential evidence could be contaminated.
I'd actually decided just to get away for an evening because I'm a Chesterfield Football Club supporter. And they were playing on the Tuesday night, and my wife just said, why don't you drive up there? And so I went up to see the game. I got halfway, I got to Newark, and I got a phone call to say that they'd found these shallow graves. So I came back, and then we spent the night thinking the worst, and that was going to be where they'd find them. And then the next morning I woke up with the news that they'd found that they were just badger sets, basically. So there was that sense of hope still that it's not them and they might still be alive.
I do believe that the piece in the jigsaw we're looking for lies in or very close to Soham. Please look closely at those around you, friends, neighbours, families, and please report any suspicious behaviour to the police.
The next day, police arrested 2 people who were very close to the school. Ian Huntley was the caretaker at the neighbouring secondary, Soham Village College, while his girlfriend, Maxine Carr, had been a teaching assistant at St Andrews, hired personally by Jeff.
By the weekend, that's when Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr were arrested. And that obviously made a complete change and took a complete different turn when we realised that the 2 people who they'd arrested were involved with Soham Village College and our school. And that was devastating. I met him when I was arranging a ball over at the Village College, and obviously as caretaker I had to work with him to see that everything was set up. So I was talking with him, and he introduced me to Maxine Carr, and he said she was interested in working with children. And so I said, well, if she comes over to see me. So she came over and had a chat with me, and said she could come and work as a voluntary helper. And she was excellent. She was very good, and the teachers with whom she worked thought that she was very good, a good relationship with the children. And they full of praise for the way she was in school. I couldn't believe that she would be involved in the murder of the 2 girls. I couldn't believe that at all.
The men discovered 2 bodies in a small wooded area by a track. They immediately contacted police, and Suffolk officers attended the scene, and the area has been immediately cordoned off.
The girls' bodies were eventually found 13 days after their disappearance. But it took police 4 more days before a formal identification was possible.
It is with great sadness that I have to tell you the following news. It may be some days yet before we are able to positively identify the 2 bodies found at Common Drove near Lakenheath in Suffolk yesterday lunchtime. However, we are certain, as we possibly can be tonight, that they are those of Holly and Jessica. Holly and Jessica's families have been told this terrible news.
Once the girls' bodies have been found, a few days after that, I went to see both sets of parents. And then I was asked if I'd do the reading. That was they asked if I would do the reading in the cathedral. And yes, that was... I can remember thinking that was going to be one of the most difficult things I could ever have to do, was to go and meet with them. But they both, sets of parents, made it incredibly easy for me. And I just felt that they were incredible people. I had 2 letters from parents that I've still got, that I treasure. And because they just said, no matter what happened, you must carry on doing within school what you do, because obviously they were totally happy with their children's life in school, and I think because I'd known them a long time, they knew what I was trying to do, and so they said, you know, you must carry on doing what you're doing. Basically saying, even if she was employed in school, even if she did do something, that's not your fault. And I think those two letters helped me and gave me more support than anything else at the time, even though they probably didn't realise, those people, when they wrote them.
The funeral took place just before the start of the autumn term, and with 400 pupils about to return to school, Jeff had to put any thoughts of retirement on hold.
Once the site became the site of a murder inquiry, the village college site and our site, I had to wait until we could get back into school so that we could start the practical side of getting school ready for the children to come back. I mean, there were times during those weeks of that summer holiday when I didn't know where I was getting my reserves from, actually, because there were times when I just wanted to stop the world, sort of thing. But there was always something that I felt I could do, and I think that was the important thing. There was always something I felt that I could do and I needed to do, and I did feel that sense of having to not set the tone, but having that sense of people expecting a certain level of fortitude, if you like. And so, yes, there was that kept me going, I think. That I felt I had to be there for some people. And I managed it, but going on to once term started, and again, because of the practical nature of having to set up school and all the things that we did, but by 2 or 3 weeks into term, I was just absolutely exhausted. At one point we spoke with a lady from the Education Authority in Dunblane, and she came down to meet with us to speak about the way they had worked with children after Dunblane. And one of the things that stuck out in my mind from my conversation with her was this element of it may not happen, they may not need help this 6 months, they may not need help this year, but 5 years on they may need help. You know, and so those children, we've got to be prepared for helping when they're ready to go to university, or something might be triggered that says, you know, I need help. So we've got to be prepared for that.
Bereavement counsellors were on hand to speak to any pupils or parents who needed them.
We knew that we'd have to have something in place for when the children came back to school. And so we had these counsellors set up for the secondary school and for our school. And I'd said to the parents that we would work very closely together, parents and school, and if we felt their children were in any way needing help, then we would get that help for them. And they would tell us if they could see things at home that were different, and we would tell them if we could see things at school that were different, that would indicate that they would need help. On the very first morning, I can remember vividly going out to open the gates, because the gate had been closed all the way through the summer, and nobody had bothered to open it, which it's normally, of course, open for all the parents, and then it was still closed. So I can remember going out there, and the parents and the children were all waiting, and I went and I opened the gate, and it really was like opening the floodgates. They just ran into school. They were so keen to get back into school, and it was tremendous, really, because that made me feel, yes, this is what they need. You know, they need to get back to school. They need that normality of school. But the counsellors, we didn't use them, and the village college didn't. Not in those first few days. I mean, that was so they left Soham basically, and then what we had to be prepared for was the fact that some of our children would need help and counselling at some point. Recently appointed was our educational psychologist, and he was superb, and he's still with us, but he took on that role of acting as the counsellor for children whenever we felt it was needed. And that happened throughout the year with perhaps up to 8 or 9 pupils. And we knew that that would continue then, because obviously the next stage for them, going on a year, was moving up to Soham Village College. Moving next door, basically, but moving up to secondary education. And because Frank, our educational psychologist, is also their educational psychologist, he was able to follow those children up into secondary education. And that was very, very important, that link. We were concerned that those pupils who had been so closely affected might think, who can we trust? And there was obviously that element, and we spoke with parents about that, you know, that obviously this is going to be something that they might talk to you about. And we didn't have any definite message that we could say to them. We couldn't say to them, you know, you can trust everybody else, because you can't. But what we could say to them was, the vast majority of people in this world are good. And I think that was the message we wanted to get across. There will be people who are not, and people who want to do harm. But these are the minority, these are very few. The majority of people who you'll come into contact with are good.
Jeff Fisher finally retired at Christmas, although he's helping out briefly at a nearby primary school.
It certainly made me question my judgment, very much so. You know, how could I, you know, what's my judgment like? I always thought I knew people, I always thought I could judge people. And there was an element of that, certainly. I don't think that now. I don't think my judgment is poor, or, you know, but there are always going to be times when I will look back and think, should I have seen things, or should I have spotted things? That's always going to be there. That can never disappear.